The story revolves around the main character, Lilia, a young girl recently reborn into a world reminiscent of medieval Europe. Though in her previous life she lived in Japan, loved manga, and was 30 years old, the circumstances of her death and reincarnation remain unclear. Despite this, Lilia is surrounded by love and care, with her parents cherishing her deeply. Lilia's mother, Iris Carroll, often remarks on her daughter's beauty, especially her large, sparkling eyes, foreseeing that she will grow into a lovely woman. Iris is not only the girl's mother but also the owner of the Carroll family land, with a strong presence and authority. Lilia's father, Guy Carroll, is a powerful figure as well, serving as the head of the Order of Knights at the royal palace. Though Lilia cannot recall her previous life's details, such as her name or the cause of her death, her parents' affection and support fill her with happiness. She finds it difficult to believe at first, but she is the daughter of a duke, an extraordinary position in this new world. Determined to make the most of her new life, she resolves to live fully, embracing her new identity. One day, as Lilia reaches for documents among her books, her mother intervenes, explaining that the papers are for her work. Iris then uses a wind-based magic spell to summon Lilia's toy, which flies into her hands, revealing the existence of magic in this world, something reminiscent of the game Lilia remembers from her past life. This discovery motivates Lilia even further. She now realizes she must grow and strengthen her body to become capable of wielding magic. She understands that mastering magic requires an extensive, encyclopedic knowledge. As she focuses inwardly, Lilia senses a latent power within her and deduces that this is the same magical energy she will need to train. She becomes determined to harness this power, dreaming of becoming an adventurer like the ones in the stories she used to love. Her maid, noticing Lilia's rapid growth and magical abilities, informs Iris, who proudly acknowledges that her daughter is as strong as her father. Lilia, only 3 years old, already knows how to read and write, and her ambitious spirit pushes her to consider writing her own books and manga, inspired by the ones she enjoyed in her previous life. However, she remains uncertain whether her creations would succeed in this world. One day, Lilia stumbles upon a paper labeled tax on the table, a document mistakenly mixed into her drawings. Iris, her mother, apologizes for the confusion, explaining that she handles such documents because, as the baronet of Carroll family lands, she manages their financial matters. This triggers a memory for Lilia, reminding her of a farm rebuilding game she used to play in her past life. Excited by the thought, Lilia expresses interest in trying something similar in this world. Curious about the financial state of the southern lands, Lilia reads that they are impoverished, with a poor harvest each year. Her mother writes petitions annually for tax relief and requests financial aid to help the people there. The solution, Lilia muses, is to increase the cultivated area. Inspired by her experience in the game, Lilia approaches her mother with a suggestion. She proposes that if the southern lands grow delicious vegetables, their economy will improve. By building new houses and increasing wages, the people could better survive the winter, similar to strategies she used in the game. However, Iris, while intrigued by the idea, questions who would handle the construction and clearing of the forests, as both tasks require resources, people and money. Undeterred, Lilia explains that during the winter months, people have less agricultural work, and this time could be spent on these projects. She suggests delegating the management of the land to the people, allowing them to cultivate it themselves. The investment required to assist them could be recouped within a few years as the land begins to yield better harvests. Lilia's ideas, though unusual for her young age, show a remarkable understanding of economics and management, leaving her mother impressed and hopeful for the future of their family's land. Lilia, trying to make sense of the tax credits and expenditures, suggested that the money spent on old houses could be better managed. However, her mother quickly corrected her, explaining that taxes, winter work, and crop yields weren't interconnected in the way Lilia thought. Iris emphasized that the information Lilia was relying on wasn't accurate and that she needed to gather more facts before drawing conclusions. She pointed out that the real challenges facing the land, such as demon attacks and other unforeseen events, complicated the situation far beyond the scope of Lilia's game-based logic. Lilia realized that, of course, things couldn't be as simple as they seemed in the game, and the people living on the estate faced real problems that she hadn't fully understood. Yet, Iris was pleased that her daughter was taking an active interest in the estate's affairs and proposed that they think through solutions together. Lilia, excited by the challenge, agreed. To her, running the estate felt like solving a quest from a game, a challenge she found enjoyable. Determined, Lilia thought about expanding the estate's territory, tackling the problems one by one. The scene then shifted to her father, Guy Carroll, who remarked to Emperor Robert von Luxel that his daughter was unusually intelligent for her age. The emperor teased Guy, suggesting that he was too fond of his daughter, but also acknowledged her brilliance. Robert, curious, questioned Guy about Lilia's involvement in managing the estate's finances and petitions, starting at such a young age. Iris was once told she couldn't have children, but she gave birth to a daughter whom she thought was beautiful, brilliant, and determined. Her daughter also had gorgeous hair. Guy recounted a surprising incident where Lilia, instead of asking for a typical pet like a kitten, had requested a higher spirit. Meanwhile, Iris was managing more immediate concerns. Recent heavy rains had caused damage across the lands, prompting her to order the servants to quickly gather men to repair a broken dam. When she mentioned needing help, Lilia volunteered, assuring her mother that she and her spirits could assist. Now 5 years old, Lilia summoned the wind spirit, Azura, to assess the state of the northern villages, while the water spirit, Leisure, controlled the river's water levels to prevent flooding. Leisure, ever loyal, promised to carry out her wishes. Lilia thanked him, showcasing her growing command over powerful spirits. Emperor Robert was astonished by Lilia's ability to control a higher spirit, a feat usually reserved for the heads of battle mages or individuals with immense magical prowess. Such control required significant power, and he couldn't believe a 5-year-old could accomplish it. Guy confirmed his daughter's incredible magical potential, prompting the emperor to declare Lilia a genius. He then insisted that Guy bring Lilia to the palace, eager to meet the child. Guy, protective of his daughter, hesitated, fearing the emperor might want to use her for political gain. The emperor, however, reminded Guy of his duty as head of the Order of Knights and urged him to consider the country's needs. Meanwhile, Lilia, using her core magic, directed the spirits to absorb the magical energy around them. Leisure complemented the power, calling it delicious, before the spirits flew off. Iris, watching her daughter, praised her once again, remarking that Lilia's abilities were unparalleled. Lilia, curious, asked if having such power was a bad thing. Her mother explained that within every person lies a magical core, a source of energy that can be shaped into magic. However, the way Lilia controlled this power, particularly through her ability to use the orb, was unheard of. No one before had wielded magic in this manner, and it made Lilia unique, even suggesting that she might be chosen by the gods. Iris warned her daughter that her extraordinary abilities, while remarkable, were also dangerous. If others learned of her powers, they might seek to exploit her for influence or wealth, especially since she was still a child. Lilia, reflecting on her special training, realized that she had gained power far beyond what was normal, a power that transcended the common understanding of magic. Yet, despite her young age, she was determined to keep honing her abilities, even jokingly wishing for magic cheats to make the process easier. Just as Lilia prepared to continue her studies, her mother stopped her, reminding her to gather the papers and leave for the evening. Iris also pointed out that Lilia's birthday party would be held the next day, much to her daughter's surprise. Lilia questioned why they were celebrating at the emperor's palace instead of at home. Iris explained that Guy would be tied up with royal duties the entire day, and so His Majesty had graciously arranged the festivities. Lilia's mother, Iris, mentioned that tomorrow Lilia would be dressed as a true princess for her birthday, which was to be held at the royal palace. Though Lilia was an aristocrat and the daughter of the head of the knightly order, she was already a beauty and a magical prodigy at just 5 years old. However, the thought of celebrating her birthday at the palace filled her with unease. The country had 3 princes aged 4, 6, and 8, and Lilia dreaded the prospect of a political marriage. The mere idea of being bound to such a fate left her furious, thinking how unfortunate it would be. Sensing her distress, the water spirit, Leisure, offered to help by summoning a storm to cancel the event, but Lilia quickly dismissed the idea. Still, the thought lingered that if she celebrated her birthday at the palace, it might lead to an arranged marriage with a prince, followed by a lifetime of political manipulation. Imagining herself as the archetypal evil duke's daughter, Lilia contemplated playing the role just like in the stories she'd read. However, she realized that refusing to attend the party would displease the imperial family, leading to a disastrous outcome. Not wanting that, she resolved to go along with the plan. The spirits, worried about her, asked if she was okay. Lilia reassured them, though her mind drifted back to her ideal life of adventure and estate management, the RPG-style life she truly desired. The next day, her maid helped her get ready, complimenting her beauty. Lilia's parents also praised her appearance, with her father, Guy, remarking that she looked like she had stepped straight out of a painting. Though grateful for their compliments, Lilia sensed they were starting to pick up on her internal struggles. Guy, proud of her for caring about the estate and their people, told her not to overexert herself and assured her that she could always ask for help. Her mother, Iris, echoed the sentiment, reminding Lilia that it was okay to take a break sometimes. Deeply moved by their kindness, Lilia silently vowed to give her all for their sake. Upon arriving at the palace, Lilia ran ahead, determined to show she was perfectly fine and ready to be on her best behavior. As they entered the garden where the event was being held, the emperor called them in. Present were Empress Shirley and the three princes: Isaac, the eldest, Leonard, the middle child, and Fernando, the youngest. Iris expressed her gratitude to the emperor for hosting such a grand event, while Gaius proudly introduced Lilia. The young girl bowed respectfully and introduced herself as the only daughter of Gaius Carol. She then introduced her companions, the water spirit Leisure on her right shoulder and the wind spirit Sylphajura on her left, explaining that they had signed a contract and were now her friends. The emperor, clearly impressed, recognized the spirits from the stories he'd heard and commented on how Lilia was almost the same age as his sons, hoping they would become good friends. Lilia, ever polite, humbly responded that she was unworthy of such an honor. At that moment, Leonard, the second prince, spoke up, dismissing the need for formalities. Enthralled by the water spirit, he asked if he could touch it, but as soon as he reached out, Leisure slapped his hand away. Apologizing quickly, Lilia explained that the spirit didn't like being touched by anyone other than her. Leonard, unaccustomed to rejection, burst into tears. The emperor tried to comfort his son, explaining that spirits only bond with their masters, but this didn't stop the youngest prince, Fernando, from crying as well. Lilia, observing the commotion, understood that despite Leonard's age of 6 and his position as a junior high student, he was still a child, and thus she chose not to intervene. However, Leonard, still upset, turned on Lilia, accusing her of being an upstart and demanding she give him what he wanted. Lilia was taken aback by his boldness, especially at her own birthday party. She glanced at her parents and noticed that, while they were clearly angry at the insult, they maintained their composure, smiling reassuringly at their daughter. At that moment, a new figure entered the scene, a young man who exuded a captivating aura. He approached the boys and calmly asked why they were crying. Lilia, startled by his sudden appearance, was struck by his handsomeness. The man spoke to the emperor, inquiring about what had transpired. The emperor explained that Leonard had acted foolishly and that the situation had escalated from there. While Lilia didn't quite understand why this mysterious figure had appeared, she couldn't help but be drawn to his striking appearance. She instinctively hid behind her father but couldn't take her eyes off him. As the situation unfolded, the young man, Erk von Rubel, approached Lilia's father, Guy, and apologized for the disturbance caused by Prince Leonardo. He politely asked if they could step aside until the prince calmed down. Lilia, hiding behind her father, was unsure what was happening. Guy reassured his daughter that they needed to go along with Erk's request. Still, she hesitated, remaining tucked behind him. Sensing her unease, Guy crouched down, asking if she was all right. He affectionately called her cute and small, making Erk laugh as he thanked her for her patience. Lilia was utterly perplexed, wondering if this sort of confusion was normal in games designed for little girls. Everything felt so unfamiliar and overwhelming. At that moment, Erk asked for permission to introduce himself properly. He revealed his full name: Erk von Rubel, the emperor's nephew, with striking black hair, golden eyes, and refined features. To Lilia, he seemed like a figure of great respect, almost godlike in appearance and demeanor. She found herself unable to meet his gaze, feeling utterly out of place. Her mother, Iris, gently reminded her to stand properly and not be rude, but even then, Lilia couldn't bring herself to look at Erk. Iris, noticing her daughter's discomfort, apologized on Lilia's behalf, explaining that she was simply shy. She also mentioned that it was Lilia's 5th birthday and that no one had yet congratulated her. Lilia was mortified, unable to believe her mother would bring up such a thing in front of royalty, especially at their first meeting. She felt it was deeply inappropriate to expect congratulations from a royal family member, and she whispered to her mother that it was embarrassing. Her nerves escalated as she realized she couldn't even say Erk's name aloud. She felt pathetic for not being able to manage something so simple. To her surprise, Erk stepped forward and graciously wished her a happy birthday. His kind gesture embarrassed Lilia so much that she stumbled and fell, overwhelmed by the entire situation. She couldn't comprehend how things had taken such a sudden turn towards what felt like a romantic storyline, and it flustered her even more. Erk's striking appearance, his pitch-black hair, golden eyes like honey, and serious demeanor left her feeling awkward, especially since his rare, awkward smile seemed directed at her. Reflecting on the moment made her heart race with embarrassment. At that moment, the wind spirit Sylphajura commented to Leisure, but the water spirit couldn't make sense of the situation either. Lilia, overwhelmed by her emotions, unconsciously tapped into her magic. Suddenly, a massive pillar of mana shot into the sky, revealing a brilliant, cloudless blue expanse. Lilia, gazing at the sky, thought it was as beautiful as Erk and mused, somewhat deliriously, about presenting him with a slice of that sky. She then realized there was no ceiling above her and questioned how long she had been asleep. Iris entered the room, surprised to see the magical display, and asked her daughter how she had managed to cast such a powerful spell in her sleep. She warned Lilia that had the magic continued, the ceiling would have collapsed. Lilia quickly apologized, but her mother gently told her that an apology wasn't enough. Iris explained that Lilia's magical powers were growing dangerously strong, just as they had the day before, and urged her to practice restraint. However, Guy reassured them both, noting that luckily, no one had been hurt. Iris sighed in relief, expressing her gratitude that the situation hadn't escalated. Turning back to Lilia, Iris offered motherly advice, telling her that despite her immense power, she was still a child and didn't need to shoulder everything alone. She reminded Lilia that she was only 5 and could always turn to her parents for help. The mom asked the girl what she had dreamed. Lilia, touched by her mother's understanding, reflected on how overwhelmed she had been by the dream of the handsome gentleman Erk. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to speak of it. Sensing her daughter's hesitation, Iris reassured her that everything would be fine and that Lilia could leave any burdens to her. Later that day, Guy departed for his duties at the castle, and Iris encouraged Lilia to come to breakfast. Before they could head to the dining room, the butler interrupted, apologizing but informing Iris that an urgent matter required her attention. Iris instructed Lilia to go ahead to the dining room while she dealt with the issue. Lilia, puzzled but obedient, agreed and headed to the dining room alone. Sitting at the dining table, Lilia felt uneasy eating by herself, especially since her mother hadn't yet arrived. Just then, her spirits appeared, comforting her with their presence. Leisure, visibly tired, remarked that the magic Lilia had given him earlier wasn't enough. He explained that he had risked his life to protect her and was exhausted. Lilia, grateful, sincerely thanked him for his efforts. Sylphajura chimed in, teasing that this was the first time Leisure had made such a comment, clearly impressed by the bond between Lilia and her spirits. Lilia confirmed that she had indeed been deeply moved and was glad to have such loyal companions by her side. Lilia was still processing the events of the morning when her mother, Iris, entered the room and asked if she would mind having a guest for breakfast. To her surprise, Erk von Rubel entered, and the protagonist was taken aback, wondering why he was there. Erk explained that the emperor had heard an explosion earlier in the day and had been concerned about her well-being, which led him to come and check on her. He noticed Lilia's agitated state and apologized for surprising her so much. At that moment, Iris reminded her daughter to behave properly in front of their guest. Lilia, still flustered, stood up and apologized for her appearance, but Erk reassured her that it wasn't necessary. He insisted that he should be the one apologizing for the unexpected visit. Lilia realized Erk hadn't looked directly into her eyes yet, likely because of her small stature. She had a moment of panic, fearing that if she raised her head and he noticed her face, she wouldn't know how to react. Urk then mentioned that he had heard the morning's commotion was caused by her careless use of magic, and he asked if she had hurt herself. Lilia thanked him for his concern, and Iris gestured for him to sit. As Lilia tried to calm herself, she reassured herself that her mother would manage the situation and decided to focus on channeling her magic better, determined to grow stronger. However, when Urk sat next to her, Lilia was surprised once again by his proximity. Iris engaged in conversation with Urk, asking if he was His Majesty's assistant. At just 15 years old, Urk was known for working hard, even foregoing the academy due to his lack of magic powers. Urk confirmed this, explaining that because he had no magic, the Emperor allowed him to study under his guidance instead. Iris was understanding, commending him for his efforts despite his young age and lack of magical abilities. Urk modestly replied that he was simply lucky to be related to the Emperor. Throughout this, Lilia was so embarrassed she couldn't even taste her soup, utterly oblivious to the conversation. Iris, noticing her daughter's distraction, asked if she agreed with Urk's modesty, but Lilia tried to avoid her mother's gaze, hoping she wouldn't be called upon. However, when Lilia finally spoke, she surprised everyone by awkwardly blurting out that Urk's very existence was like a divine miracle and that she couldn't express enough gratitude for his presence. The room fell silent at her overly dramatic statement, and only then did Lilia realize how ridiculous she must have sounded. Embarrassed beyond belief, Lilia tried to keep calm, but Urk, touched by her words, thanked her sincerely. Overwhelmed, Lilia slammed her head onto the table in a mix of frustration and humiliation. Later, in her room, her mother apologized for the morning's events. Lilia, brushing off the situation, claimed it was just a minor scratch, but Iris pointed out the small scar on her face, hinting that her daughter had fallen in love. Iris lamented that all the hard work they had put into Lilia's upbringing seemed wasted now. Lilia, bewildered by her mother's words, thought Iris was becoming overly sentimental, almost as if she were imprisoned by her own conscience. However, deep down, Lilia knew that Urk had indeed been someone she admired in her past life, having been a fan of his character, his cold gaze, his sharpness, and his direct mannerisms had captivated her. The memories of following him on social media, buying merchandise, and admiring him from afar all rushed back to her. She couldn't believe that the same person she had adored in her past life was now here, in her new life. Lilia found herself wanting to compliment him, perhaps even about how well he looked in his glasses, but she knew it would only embarrass her further. Noticing her daydreaming, Iris teased Lilia about thinking of Urk, which Lilia adamantly denied. Later, when Guy entered the room, he stormed in asking if some little jerk had hurt his daughter. Apologizing to Iris for not addressing the situation sooner, he vowed to get revenge on whoever had wronged Lilia. The protagonist tried to calm her father down, asking her mother for help as well. Just then, the butler informed Iris that everything was ready, and she told him they wouldn't show their hand immediately. Confused by the conversation, Lilia tried to explain the morning's events to her father, clarifying that she had simply fainted and hurt herself. However, Guy mentioned that the Emperor had stated that Urk would answer for Lilia's injury, leading to a discussion of engagement between Lilia and Urk. Guy reassured her that the Emperor must have misunderstood the situation, but Lilia, shocked, began to process her father's words. Was it really a misunderstanding? Could she truly be engaged to Urk? While the thought of marrying into royalty didn't seem strange given her noble title, it still felt surreal to her. The idea of a wedding, especially at such a young age, left Lilia reeling. She recalled her mother's words about handling everything and wondered if this engagement was part of a larger plan she hadn't been aware of. When Lilia ran to her mother, Iris revealed that she was now officially engaged to Urk von Rubel. She handed Lilia the contract of their engagement, explaining that the original document had already been sent to the castle, meaning nothing could be undone. The protagonist, stunned by this revelation, realized that her mother had orchestrated the entire arrangement. Lilia, who had once only dreamt of a life filled with adventure and managing her estate, now found herself bound by a marriage contract. Though the union between the high-status Carroll family and the imperial aristocracy would be advantageous, Lilia couldn't comprehend how Urk, who resembled an idol from her past life, could possibly be her husband. She imagined an absurd scenario where Urk returned home to her, and she, like a character from a romantic drama, greeted him by asking whether he preferred dinner, a bath, or horror. In this fantasy, Urk chose her, saying he wanted to be with her. The thought overwhelmed her, and she fainted for the second time that day. When Lilia regained consciousness, her mother gently asked if she had feelings for Urk. Iris assumed that Lilia would be happy with the engagement and asked if she had misread the situation. Lilia, still dazed, said that her mother wasn't wrong, but she expressed uncertainty. Urk was much older, and she wasn't sure if she could make him happy. Nonetheless, she wished him a happy marriage. Lilia believed that love could take many forms and admitted she didn't need mutual affection, she simply wanted to support him and ensure his happiness. At that moment, Guy, her father, protested that Lilia was far too young for marriage. However, Iris silenced him, insisting that a happy wedding was not an option. She said that if Guy couldn't marry her, he'd be alone forever. Lilia was still trying to process the reality of her engagement when her mother, Iris, explained the full extent of Urk's tragic family history. His parents, once beloved by the emperor, had become embroiled in a rebellion aimed at seizing the throne. Urk's father lured many aristocrats to his side, sparking a civil war that ended in disaster. The rebellion was crushed, and his father was executed, along with most of his supporters. Stripped of their titles and lands, the aristocratic families who joined the rebellion lost everything. Urk's mother, pregnant at the time, was spared until she gave birth, only to be executed the day after. Urk was the innocent child left behind, taken in by the emperor but forever marked by his parents' betrayal. Though Urk was technically part of the royal family, his position was precarious. The emperor controlled his fate, including who he would marry. Lilia realized that Urk's life, like a tragic backstory from the games she used to play, had been shaped by political manipulation and misfortune. Despite his lineage, Urk was viewed by some as an outcast, the son of a traitor. Rumors circulated about him, with people questioning how he could walk the palace halls without shame, given his parents' sins. However, anyone who spoke too freely about Urk's past risked their own life, as he remained under the emperor's protection. In a private meeting, Urk reported to the emperor, who informed him of his engagement to Lilia. The emperor showed him the engagement contract, which had come from the Duchess of Carroll, and explained that Lilia's strength and intelligence made her a valuable match for Urk. The emperor acknowledged that it would have been easier if Lilia had married one of his sons, but he was confident Urk could win her heart. He also cautioned Urk not to let Lilia's unpredictable nature overwhelm him, before dismissing him. Back in her room, Lilia listened as her mother explained her role in orchestrating the engagement. Iris had proposed the match because she knew it would benefit both the royal family and the Carrolls. By marrying into the royal bloodline, the Carroll family would gain more influence, while the royal family could keep Lilia's considerable talents close. Iris knew that Lilia wouldn't refuse the engagement once she learned of Urk's tragic background. However, Lilia surprised her mother by admitting that, while she hadn't expected this, she was willing to do anything to ensure Urk's happiness. In her heart, she felt that if she could make him happy, then she would fulfill her role as his wife. Iris, clearly relieved, expressed her happiness at Lilia's acceptance of the engagement. When Lilia asked if there was any work for her today, her mother gently told her to rest, as they had many things to take care of the following day. Lilia ran off, thanking her mother with a sense of determination, while her father, Guy, remarked in surprise that he had expected Lilia to reject the engagement. Iris turned to Guy, her voice taking on a sharper tone. She asked how long he planned to sit idly by while Lilia faced the complexities of her future alone. Guy, though protective of his daughter, realized he hadn't been actively helping her navigate the difficult path ahead. Iris observed her daughter, noting that Lilia seemed determined and resolute. She remarked that they would soon see what would come of Lilia's decision, though she couldn't hide her own underlying concern. Lilia, on the other hand, was filled with determination. She realized that to make Urk happy, she had to prepare herself thoroughly for the future. The first step was mastering land management, as she would eventually lead their estate. She also recognized the importance of earning equal power with the royal family, which would require honing her magical abilities and building a solid reputation for her achievements. Then there was the matter of money. Lilia thought that Urk should have the freedom to buy whatever he wanted and pursue what he liked, without constraints. She praised herself for being a diligent and smart girl, one who would work tirelessly, without weekends, to ensure her future husband's happiness. In her mind, Lilia was ready to move mountains for Urk because, as she saw it, she was the protagonist of this story, destined for greatness. When she asked about Urk's whereabouts, the wind spirit, Isira, informed her that he had already returned to the castle. Lilia frowned, feeling a sense of disappointment, which caused the spirits around her to grow concerned. She admitted to herself that she felt quite foolish, having passed out twice already from the overwhelming stress. Isira jokingly remarked that it seemed fainting was becoming a family tradition for Lilia. Despite everything, Lilia decided she needed to apologize to Urk for worrying him and formally acknowledge their engagement. However, as she sat down to write the letter, Lilia found it far more challenging than she anticipated. She struggled to express her emotions properly, torn between formal language and a more personal touch. She adored Urk's kind demeanor, his handsome figure, and his calming voice, even likening him to a god. Yet, each attempt to draft the letter felt inadequate. She started by wishing him health and prosperity, but quickly realized it sounded far too formal. Then, she tried congratulating him on their engagement, but she still felt uncertain. After numerous failed attempts, her hand began to ache from all the writing. Sensing her frustration, the wind spirit suggested using magic to help with the letter. Intrigued, Lilia watched as Isira demonstrated a simple spell that combined wind and fire magic to create writing by scorching the paper, almost like burning the letters into it. Lilia was amazed by how effortlessly the magic worked, but Isira explained that it was just a simple spell to adjust temperature, which could also be applied to writing. Lilia's mind immediately raced with the possibilities. She could use this spell to write documents faster, much like typing on a computer, and produce multiple documents in a fraction of the time it would take her to write by hand. It was like a magical printer in her eyes. Excited by the prospect, Lilia attempted to create small magic circles to mimic the process. However, her first try ended with the paper catching fire. Isira reminded her to control the fire's intensity, but after another failed attempt, the paper was torn apart by the wind. Frustrated but determined, Lilia knew that mastering this skill would take time, and her mana reserves were already feeling the strain. Meanwhile, Urk stood in the royal library, reviewing his plans for the evening. He had intended to check on the princes first, then handle some documents for His Majesty. Just then, one of Lilia's spirits appeared before him, delivering her letter. As he read it, Urk couldn't help but smile. Lilia had written that she imagined he must have been surprised by the news of their engagement but assured him that she would do everything in her power to provide him with a happy life. She asked him to trust her and join her on this journey. Urk, touched by her sincerity, smiled warmly and thanked her, noticing with amusement that the edges of the letter were slightly burned. Back at home, Iris showed Lilia a beautiful gown that had been custom-made for a special occasion. Iris explained that they would be returning to the palace the next day for another celebration. His Majesty, feeling guilty about how Lilia's birthday party had been disrupted, wanted to make amends by hosting the event once again. Lilia would have the chance to wear her new gown and celebrate her birthday properly at the palace. Lilia was overwhelmed, exhausted by everything going on around her. All she wanted was some peace and quiet to work at home. Yet, her mother, Iris, had other plans. She eagerly reminded Lilia that the upcoming celebration was a great opportunity to publicly show her affection for Urk, especially in front of the emperor. Lilia, though reluctant, realized she had no choice and agreed. Her mother suggested that she finish her work early and get some rest, noting that Lilia had already been handling everything so well. Iris then brought up the backlog of waterway maintenance paperwork, suggesting it was time to make copies and distribute them to the necessary entrepreneurs. Lilia, wanting to get things done quickly, asked if she could handle it. Surprised, Iris warned that there were a lot of documents, but before she could object, Lilia used her new printer spell, completing everything instantly. Iris was amazed, as her daughter explained the spell. It was a sophisticated form of magic that allowed her to create, copy, and print documents by using a thin layer of magical energy, much like a modern-day printer. Lilia explained how the spell could generate text and calculations just like a computer, allowing her to efficiently create any document she needed. Iris marveled at the potential of such magic, calling it truly remarkable. Lilia then revealed another impressive feat. She had written a treatise on the concept of magical clots, exploring the density and flow of magical energy, and how magic could be used without chanting. She wanted to submit this report to the government to confirm its accuracy. After reading part of it, Iris was astounded, calling it revolutionary. She realized that the ideas Lilia presented would completely transform the kingdom's understanding of magic. With Lilia as a living example of the theory in action, neither the emperor nor the nation's mages could dismiss her findings. However, Iris was curious about Lilia's larger goal. What was she truly aiming for with this newfound knowledge? Lilia responded with confidence. She wanted to become the strongest mage in the country, a true sage. By becoming a sage, with the wisdom and influence it carried, she would be able to protect Urk from any political threats. Iris, impressed, acknowledged that with both magical prowess and political power, Lilia would indeed be able to protect him. Lilia added that she would combine these goals with her role in managing the Carroll family domain. Iris, though proud, sighed at the realization of the path her daughter had chosen. She warned Lilia to hold off on publishing the treatise too soon. If the aristocracy discovered Lilia's genius and potential to become a sage, they might see her as a threat and attempt to use her for their own purposes. Success, wealth, and honor would inevitably attract unwanted attention, and if the engagement with Urk were to become public knowledge, some might even seek to undermine or cancel it. The more powerful Lilia became, the more dangerous her position could become within the court. Lilia was surprised by her mother's concern. She thought she could simply ignore the other aristocrats and their petty power struggles, but Iris explained the deeper risks. What if, in a bid to stop Lilia, someone harmed him? Iris insisted that before announcing the engagement, they needed to ensure that no external forces could jeopardize it. Only then would they submit the treatise directly to His Majesty. Once the political climate had settled, Lilia could then work openly toward becoming a sage. Understanding her mother's logic, Lilia agreed. For Urk's sake, she vowed to take a more cautious approach, gradually building her achievements. She was determined to work her way to the top, slowly but surely, all for the sake of protecting Urk. Iris, though unsure of how long Lilia could shield him from the darker forces of the aristocracy, promised to support her daughter. The next morning, Lilia awoke suddenly, realizing she had passed out from exhaustion while working the night before. To her shock, Urk was standing in her room, wishing her good morning. Startled, Lilia jumped out of bed, demanding to know why he was there. Urk, noticing Lilia's confusion and embarrassment, gently explained that Duke Carroll had asked him to wake her up. He apologized for entering her room without permission, clearly trying to be polite. At that moment, Isira, the wind spirit, told Lilia that Urk would be accompanying her to the party that evening. Lilia, overwhelmed with emotions, bowed her head and apologized to Urk. She confessed that even though she was too young to be his bride, she was determined to do anything to make him happy. If he had someone else he liked, she said she would support him in any way she could, whether it was by offering money, influence, or even working herself to the bone to ensure his happiness. Urk, seeing her earnestness, reassured her gently. He told her not to worry, suggesting that perhaps she didn't truly want to marry someone much older than herself. He even hinted that the engagement could be broken off if she wished, but Lilia firmly denied it. She insisted that she would step aside only if she became an obstacle to his happiness. Urk, visibly uncomfortable with the situation, suggested they go out for breakfast, as the Duke was already waiting. Before leaving, he affectionately stroked Lilia's head, which left her blushing. His long, slender fingers grazed her head, and Lilia, feeling his touch, tried to stay composed, determined not to faint this time. As Lilia stood up, she accidentally hurt her hand when Isira bit her out of fear. Blood began to trickle from the wound. Leisure, the water spirit, quickly apologized, but before he could stop the bleeding, Urk stepped in, asking to see Lilia's hand. He calmly removed his handkerchief to bandage the wound, and as he did, Lilia noticed his collarbone, which flustered her even more. Concerned, Urk thought she might be worse off than she appeared and said he would call for a doctor. Later, at the doctor's, it was confirmed that the wound was minor and would heal quickly with proper care. The doctor instructed them to disinfect the wound twice a day, assuring them everything would be fine. Just as they finished, Gaius burst into the room, worried and demanding to know if Lilia was hurt because of Urk. Misunderstanding the situation, he accused Urk of being the cause of her constant injuries. Lilia quickly calmed her father down, explaining that he was mistaken and that Urk wasn't to blame. Guy, still tense, grumbled that he couldn't trust Urk around his daughter, as Lilia seemed to be getting hurt all the time. Iris intervened, telling Guy not to speak that way. She then turned to Lilia, asking her to confess if she had fainted again because of something foolish. After confirming that it wasn't Urk's fault, Iris suggested that Lilia should apologize to him, as he was in the living room, waiting. Realizing she had embarrassed Urk once again, Lilia hurried to make amends. Just as she stood in front of the door, preparing herself to face him, Urk appeared behind her, softly asking if her wound was okay. Lilia assured him that she was fine and apologized for causing him any trouble. Urk, though relieved, looked slightly sad, which only made Lilia think about how beautiful he was, even when he wasn't smiling. Without warning, Urk scooped her up into his arms, apologizing again and saying it must be painful for her to walk. He suggested he carry her until she was rested. Flustered but secretly delighted, Lilia couldn't believe her luck, thinking how great it was to be small. As Urk carried her down the hall, he remarked that the corridor was unusually cold and suggested they head to a warmer room. Lilia hadn't noticed at first, but she soon realized the hallway was indeed freezing. The walls were covered in ice, and it became clear that this wasn't normal. As they approached, Lilia recognized the powerful water magic at play. This ice had been created by Leisure, the water spirit. Lilia, sensing the connection, guessed that the ice might be a manifestation of Leisure's tears. Determined to fix the situation, Lilia told Urk to duck. She summoned her magic, using fire to melt the ice. As she conjured a fireball, Urk noticed she wasn't chanting, a rare skill only the most powerful mages possessed. However, even a small portion of her magic could appease the higher spirits, allowing her to use just a bit to begin conjuring. In short, she could focus her magic and power to cast multiple spells and, after doing so, finally melted the ice. The boy realized that she didn't need to use incantations, something His Majesty had told him about, though he hadn't expected the girl to be this strong. He had observed many martial mages train, but they all used chants unlike her. The boy then asked what she had studied to perform sorcery so effortlessly. There are two types of mages in the world. One transfers their magical power to a spirit, who then performs the spell. These are known as spirit mages. The other creates a magic circle where the spell's conditions and outcomes are inscribed, activating it with their own magic power. These are called circle mages. Both types use chanting, infusing magic into their voice to cast spells. However, the protagonist had trained on her own, even before she learned to speak, essentially teaching herself magic. The boy remarked that she was truly talented and noted that His Majesty would need someone like her. When the protagonist entered the room, Azura asked her not to scold the water spirit, explaining that he loved her very much. The protagonist lowered her head and requested Leisure, the water spirit, to come out from under the cupboard. Leisure, crying, said that he had hurt her and that she was bleeding, but Lilia apologized, admitting it was her fault for stepping on his tail. She asked if it had hurt, and the water spirit reassured her that he was fine, then inquired about her well-being. He began to apologize again and hugged her. The boy commented on how close they were, and the main character stated that the spirits were her true friends. The boy admitted he was a bit envious, as he couldn't understand what the spirits were saying. The boy recalled hearing people talk about how the Emperor's late brother's son, Urk, had no magical powers. They wondered if he could do anything at all and remarked that he couldn't even send a letter, suggesting it might be divine punishment for defying His Majesty. His Majesty had reassured the boy not to worry about it, explaining that Urk never had a natural inclination toward magic, and advised him to study hard. He promised that he would offer guidance and support to him later. Urk watched as the mages assembled into formation, intending to use the magic circle as soon as they were ready. He thought the battle mages were incredibly impressive and wished he could do magic too. He believed that if he could use magic, he could assist His Majesty and the battle mages. Just then, a blue bird appeared above him. Urk asked where it had come from and if it was kept in the castle. He could hear it but couldn't understand it. He then took out a biscuit his grandmother had recently given him and offered it to the bird, but it flew away. This bird was a higher spirit and returned to its master. Urk thought that if he had magical powers, he could talk to the bird, but without them, he felt useless. Suddenly, an Azura landed on his head, which surprised the protagonist, as higher spirits usually only interact with those they've made contracts with. The Azura used magic to burn a message onto a piece of paper, saying that if Urk treated the Duchess well, they would assist him a little. At this, Urk became emotional and thanked them sincerely. The Azura then flew over to the girl, and she asked what it had told the boy. The wind spirit responded that it had shared the girl's deepest secret, which she was too ashamed to reveal. The protagonist, puzzled, asked what that meant. Urk looked at the girl and realized she was an incredible person, and being near her warmed his heart. Soon after, the maid informed the girl that everything was ready. The main character had never worn a black dress before, but the maid assured her that it suited her very well. The Gothic style was something completely new to her, and it also happened to be the color associated with Urk-san. The protagonist was trembling with excitement. Lyshura commented that, for that reason, he should wear the same color as well. She also mentioned that the bow he was wearing matched hers, though Lyshura decided to wear a red bow instead. At that moment, the girl's mother entered the room and remarked on how beautiful her daughter looked. She then instructed her to stand beside her future husband. Iris mentioned that it was crucial for them to wear the same colors in public, emphasizing their unity. The mother added that they looked perfect together. The protagonist, realizing her red hair exceeded her own expectations, noticed that Azura, a higher spirit, flew up to the boy. Iris acknowledged this as a sign that the higher spirit had accepted him, stating that it was exactly what he needed to win His Majesty's favor. She asked her daughter if she understood and reminded her not to relax, even though their betrothal documents had already been accepted. Due to the Emperor's influence, the agreement could still be annulled, and the mother urged them to avoid that outcome. She warned that the protagonist might be pressured to marry one of the princes instead, so they had to act as planned. As she left, Lily asked the boy to let her handle it. He took her hand, and she decided to proceed with her plans for the future Oak Lord. Later, as the protagonist traveled in the carriage with the boy, she admired his silky black hair swaying in the breeze. Outside the window was a bleak landscape, and she thought the boy looked especially cute with a small, joyful bird perched on his shoulder. His slightly parted lips revealed his pink tongue, and the protagonist recognized that his sense of style was undeniably remarkable. The boy noticed her staring and, feeling slightly embarrassed, asked her why she was looking at him that way. The protagonist quickly looked away, chastising herself for staring. She reflected that in a different situation, something dramatic might have already occurred by now. She even wondered why there were no smartphones in this world, though she mused that she could probably create a camera using a spell with a printer-like function. The protagonist resolved to make one, just so the boy's incredible fashion sense could be captured in history forever. The boy then asked her if something was wrong and what she was thinking about. He gently stroked her head and reassured her that they would be arriving soon, urging her to calm down and not feel so anxious. His voice soothed her. When they finally arrived, the boy helped her out of the carriage, and the protagonist was surprised to realize he intended to carry her in his arms again. Urk, on the other hand, wasn't entirely sure if the girl was coming along or not. Lilia felt confused, not expecting him to gaze at her in such a way, and she wondered what had happened to his formerly awkward smile. She insisted on walking by herself, not wanting to cause him discomfort. Urk, however, assured her that it was no trouble at all, joking that although it might be a bit awkward, it was her privilege as his fiancée. The boy's father appeared and playfully suggested carrying his daughter, but Iris pulled him away. The boy decided to carry her himself. The protagonist found herself really liking this new place they had arrived at. As they stepped out, they were greeted by the Emperor and his wife. The protagonist thanked them for the invitation, and the Empress apologized once more for what had happened the last time. She also wished the girl a happy birthday again. When Lilia looked up, she saw the Emperor, Empress, and their first and third sons, though the second son was noticeably absent. Urk informed her that Leonard was under house arrest, so she had nothing to worry about. As the boy sat down, he pulled the girl onto his lap, which embarrassed her greatly. Her mother, however, gave her a stern look. The emperor mentioned that he had heard a lot about the family and noted that they seemed to have a very close relationship. Iris added that Lilia had fallen in love at first sight and that Mr. Urk was also very kind to her. She remarked that they seemed to be doing very well together. The empress, however, questioned whether it was too early for Lily to be in training, pointing out that she was only 5 years old. Iris disagreed, asserting that while Lily might be young, she was old enough to be with Urk. Besides, she wanted to nurture her daughter's budding affection. His Majesty agreed, expressing that he too wanted to see his son's first love thrive. Iris remarked that the queen was a very kind mother, and His Majesty added that her sons were diligent in their studies. The emperor agreed and suggested that perhaps Lily's talents had inspired them. Iris responded that it was nice to hear, while the protagonist didn't fully grasp this intense admiration or the rivalry at play. She hadn't realized how daunting the social life of the nobility could be and decided to follow her father's example of staying quiet in such situations. At this point, Urk noticed something was off and asked if something was wrong, but Lily said nothing and asked for a cup of tea instead. He handed it to her and gently stroked her head. The emperor then commented on how remarkable Lilia was and gave an approving expression. He told Urk that he hadn't expected to see such kindness toward a child, but added that it was easy to be kind to such a well-behaved girl. The protagonist noticed the reaction of the emperor's eldest son, interpreting it to mean that Urk didn't get along well with his brothers. The emperor explained that his sons were still young and mischievous, and it was his responsibility to guide and teach them. At that moment, the protagonist began to envy the boys, wishing she could take their place in the classroom and learn more. Iris then addressed the emperor, wishing Lily a happy birthday and inquiring about the engagement, asking if His Majesty would be celebrating it soon. The emperor replied that there was no rush, as the marquis's feast had just begun. The protagonist realized Iris wanted to keep the engagement matter hanging to maintain leverage, but also suspected Iris was angling for a prince as a potential match for Lily. Iris then praised Lilia, noting that she was exceptionally bright for her age, but also expressed concern. If Lilia were forced into an engagement she didn't want, she might even flee the country. Her mother echoed this worry, pulling out a document. The emperor asked what it was, and the mother explained that it was a paper Lilia had written. Upon reading it, the emperor noticed it detailed something called a magic nugget and the absence of chanting in her spellcasting. He turned to the Marquis of Carroll and asked if the contents were true. Iris admitted she didn't know, but confirmed that her daughter could indeed use magic without chance and create spells one by one. The emperor recalled Gaius mentioning something similar and asked Lilia what kind of magic she used. The protagonist explained that her magic was essentially a concentrated mass of energy that moved through and out of her body, fixing itself in the atmosphere. Since no existing textbooks or literature described it, she had given it a temporary name for convenience. With normal magical power, it dissipates into the atmosphere, but by concentrating it, she could cast high-level spirit spells and form magic circles. The emperor asked if she could demonstrate her magic right then and there. The protagonist hesitated, unsure of what to do, but Leisure reminded her that she had practiced the day before and encouraged her to try. She recalled that, before bed the previous night, she had asked Leisure for advice on improving her magical manipulation. Leisure had told her that, for a human, she was already quite adept. But Lilia, eager to improve, expressed her desire to enhance her abilities, particularly to achieve faster results, like printing magic as quickly as a photocopier. At this point, Leisure used magic to create an incredible ice sculpture in an instant, showcasing his skill. He suggested that Lilia could do something similar and improve her efficiency simply by practicing more. He pointed out that she had been using magic circles from books and recommended she try forming them on the fly. He explained that she should memorize the formation and, instead of relying on books, rewrite just the area of effect when using ice magic, much like printing out the necessary details. It had been 3 months since that conversation, and Lilia had been practicing diligently. It still felt strange to her. The protagonist attempted to create a figurine out of ice. LeSure corrected her, pointing out that the ice would melt if she took too long. Determined, the protagonist kept trying, but nothing seemed to work. She realized that while printouts were two-dimensional, with length and width, what she needed to understand was three-dimensional length, width, and height. she needed to visually measure its shape. In the present, she had begun shaping ice. She mentioned that if she could fit it into the magic circle, it would work. However, the emperor told her that he was unaware of such magic and called her a genius. Lilia then demonstrated her magic to the emperor, shocking him as she explained how it worked. Both the emperor and empress were amazed by Lilia's skills. Iris asked if it was unusual for someone so young to be so talented, noting that the girl even helped with her work. The emperor agreed and suggested that the girl's talents should be developed, saying it would benefit the country. He allowed her to pursue her own interests. However, Iris reminded him that if he pressured Lilia too much, she had once said she would go on an adventure to defeat demons. This left the emperor in a difficult position. In exchange for her freedom, the emperor requested a report on her abilities. Iris offered to provide the report, saying it was an effective way to handle opportunists. Eager to continue improving, the protagonist planned to write more reports and articles. The emperor understood her ambition and didn't want this genius to fade away without recognition. He approved of their engagement. He then asked the girl to explain the process of mastering magic without chanting. He inquired if he could use the magic, but the protagonist admitted she wasn't sure. She mentioned that she knew how to manipulate magic before drinking but confessed she wasn't very skilled at chanting. Iris turned to the emperor and explained that for those who use magic naturally, it can be difficult. Despite her efforts, the protagonist still couldn't maintain magic outside her magical body. The emperor realized that this might be why it's unclear whether her abilities were due to genius or some unknown discovery. The protagonist was then asked if she could teach his sons how to use magic, but she didn't understand why she should do that. She told him that her research and discoveries could change the world, and she suggested that she should instead focus on teaching the younger generation. Of course, the emperor promised to reward her, but she felt unsure about it. The protagonist had so much on her plate, researching magic, writing papers, managing the territory, and even making tools like cameras. There was so much to do and so little time. Still, the protagonist recognized that having more people who could manipulate magic was beneficial, as it opened up endless possibilities. For example, they could create tools like refrigerators and washing machines, similar to ancient inventions, which could vastly improve people's lives. Lilia didn't want to do it, but she had no choice and reluctantly agreed to the emperor's terms. He handed the documents to a servant, instructing him to take them to his study and keep them secure. The protagonist didn't want to become the prince's teacher, her real desire was to become Eric's apprentice. As the servant was carrying the documents, he dropped them, and an unknown man picked them up, cautioning him to be careful. The man then noticed a paper about magic without chanting. 3 months passed since that incident. She was happy they were engaged. Over time, she became wise and famous, running the estate, which was becoming increasingly stable. She longed to find someone she could truly love and live happily ever after, but it wasn't meant to be. She didn't understand how things had ended up this way. The protagonist was teaching the emperor's son magic. She informed Isaac and Leonard that there was no more magic in those regions and suggested they begin anew. Leonard admitted that he couldn't see magic and, therefore, couldn't use it. The protagonist was surprised that Leonard had begun calling her Lily so casually. At that moment, she raised her hand to his face and explained that this was magical vision, a technique that allowed one to see hidden magic in magical circles not visible to the naked eye. This was similar to how thieves used magic to detect traps and tricks, comparable to night vision goggles seen in video games and films. Lilia then thought it might be useful to create goggles engraved with visualization magic, which would be easy to carry around and would allow them to view a larger area. She believed Eric would be pleased with her idea. The boys then asked the protagonist what they were seeing in the sky. She explained that the magic circle they saw protected the castle, and even further up in the sky was another magic circle that protected the entire country. She told them they could see it for a while but needed to practice more, as they still had a long way to go. Sarah asked Lilia why people were so bad at magic. Lilia explained that they were only beginning to learn about it. The water spirit mentioned that although he didn't know what Lilia was thinking, she had spent the entire day with Eric.
The spirit couldn't believe she had left the protagonist alone, but Lilia assured him that the wind spirit was protecting him. The protagonist thought that even though she couldn't be with Eric, the spirit was keeping him safe. Despite the engagement crisis, she no longer felt concerned. When the group realized that Fernando was missing, they initially thought he was with them. Then they saw him standing on the balcony's edge and falling. The protagonist sent the water spirit to save him, and La Serra expanded to rescue him. Leonardo remarked on how beautiful the lily dragon was. The protagonist agreed but warned them to be cautious when going out on the balcony, even from the third floor, as everyday life, though seemingly peaceful, could present unexpected challenges and diverging events. An unknown man watched the dragon and realized it was a high-rank spirit being used by a girl without the need for chanting. He remarked that if she were used correctly, she could generate significant profit. The protagonist considered that some aristocrats might indeed think this way, and decided she should be more cautious at night. Eric arrived to check on the protagonist and asked how her classes were going. She responded that everything was going well, as the princes were fast learners, making teaching them enjoyable. Eric remarked that she had a bright future ahead, and the protagonist confirmed this. Eric then turned to the princes and addressed each one. He told Leonard that he wasn't focusing enough and needed to control his magic power before he could start speaking in class. To Fernando, he advised practicing how to move magic in and out with his spirit. Isaac was told he needed to work on consolidating more magic, as it wasn't dense enough. Lilia said goodbye to the princes, and they left. Eric observed that the princes were taking their studies seriously and added that the protagonist often looked bored while teaching. However, on the days she had classes at the castle, Master Eric would come to get her and hug her like he always did. Eric remarked that Lilia might have a talent for teaching. Lilia had grown accustomed to looking Eric in the eye and speaking to him, and she no longer worried about making mistakes in front of him. Later, her mother told her something that surprised the protagonist, prompting her to ask for clarification. Iris apologized for the short notice, explaining that her friend, Marquis, was hosting a party, and Jana was supposed to go out in the afternoon. The girl's father was busy dealing with an accident and informed her mother that he wouldn't be able to come home today. Iris felt bad about leaving the girl alone, even though there were guards and servants present, so she asked Mr. Eric to stay the night. They agreed without hesitation. Lily was excited for the night to arrive but also felt unprepared. Her mother told her to calm down, reminding her that there was still time before she left. If Lily wanted, she could help with the work, and Lily agreed. She asked the boy if he would gradually learn, knowing he would eventually have to take over, and he acknowledged this. Later, the protagonist collected this month's petitions. Her mother thanked her and asked her to review the papers to ensure there were no mistakes. The wind spirit brought a report on an investigation in the northern town. Eric asked Lilia if there was anything in particular that interested her. The protagonist didn't reply, as she was focused on the report about the wall repairs in Northtown, Carroll, including costs for materials, lodging, and other expenses. She noted that the lodging expenses for 40 workers seemed excessive. Eric asked if that implied they were inflating the costs, and Iris pointed out they had added an extra banquet fee. She said they would need to give them a notice about it, though she didn't mind, as many of the vendors were good-natured, but they drank a lot. Lilia mentioned that her mother would ask the workers if they drank only once a month. Her mother confirmed this and said she wanted them to make copies of everything. The protagonist used a spell to instantly create multiple copies. After Iris left, Eric asked Lilia what she planned to do for the day. The protagonist was happy that things were finally coming together. She was going to spend the night with Master Eric. She took a deep breath to calm herself, assuring herself that she would be fine as always. She used magic to strengthen her body, wanting to keep everything normal. Lily explained that she usually had a tutor to help with her studies, but since she had lessons at the royal castle that day, she was free and planned to study magic and write new research papers. At that point, the man suggested taking a day off, saying that he felt she was overworking herself and needed time to rest. He declared it a mandatory holiday and asked why they shouldn't just relax. The main character agreed, though she was surprised at how happy the suggestion made her feel. She watched as the man changed his clothes, enjoying the sight. If she'd had a camera, she would have recorded the whole scene, eager to continue her observations. At that moment, she caught herself thinking that she actually wanted to relax, though she wasn't sure how to go about it. She was so accustomed to either sleeping when tired or staying busy when awake. It had been the same in her previous life. She would play games on her phone between tasks, listen to music while commuting, and play online games whenever possible, only sleeping enough to avoid interfering with work the next day. Reflecting on this, she realized that rest for her usually meant doing something she enjoyed, but now that she'd been told to relax, she didn't know what to do. Eric then approached her, apologizing for making her wait. He remarked that if he had a younger sister, she would likely be like her, and asked what she usually did in her free time. Lilia replied that she usually conducted magical research and taught others. Eric asked if she ever read anything just for pleasure. She admitted to reading a lot of documents and case studies on inheritance, but Eric pointed out that those weren't books. He asked if she ever read romance novels. She replied that if a story were interesting, she'd give it a try. Eric suggested that she wouldn't know until she gave it a shot and offered to recommend some books. He mentioned that he personally preferred adventure novels, so Lilia suggested they start with adventure stories. Eric promised to bring something for her to read next time. In that moment, the main character felt an unfamiliar warmth and comfort in her chest, though she didn't fully understand the feeling. Meanwhile, Viscount Beryl was watching the protagonist's house with jealousy, upset that her house was larger than his. His butler reminded him that her family held a higher rank, being marquises, so they couldn't be compared. Beryl then instructed some bandits to steal all the papers and notes from Carol's room, telling them to bring back only the documents. The bandits, curious, asked if the papers held any special value, but Beryl told them not to ask questions. One bandit mentioned hearing that a powerful royal sorceress lived in the house and that the head of the family was also a skilled magician. Beryl assured them there were only 2 people in the house, so they didn't need to worry. Meanwhile, the main character fell asleep, and Eric realized just how tired she must have been. At that moment, spirits appeared around her, surprising him. The wind spirit wrote on a piece of paper, explaining that wind magic could cleanse the body's surface, while water magic helped regulate bodily processes and relieve fatigue. Eric noted that this magic had a healing effect and was impressed that spirits could use it, just as humans could. He asked if the spirits might teach him the technique so he could help a soldier who was frequently injured, if they were willing. Just then, the spirits noticed the bandits nearby. The wind spirit transformed into a human form, commenting that it would be inconvenient to communicate by writing all the time. The wind spirit commented that taking human form would make it easier for them to communicate directly. Eric expressed surprise, admitting he didn't know they could take on a human form. Wind Spirit suggested they should wait and discuss it later, as it seemed they had unexpected visitors, suspicious figures roaming the garden with their creatures. Eric mentioned that the estate had a security mechanism in place. If anyone crossed onto the grounds, it would trap them. However, the Wind Spirit speculated that the intruders might be using a spirit capable of bypassing the magic circle. Although the magic they were using was weak, it could still create tiny breaches in the circle, likely through painstaking effort over time. Eric then asked if the intruders had come to steal something valuable, but the Wind Spirit doubted it. He pointed out that the noble overseeing the estate maintained both a large and small private army stationed around the property to handle emergencies. Even if the intruders managed to get inside, it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. He questioned why any ordinary bandit would take such a risk, and Eric began to suspect they might be after something specific from the Carroll family. Wind Spirit agreed that, whatever their motive, they couldn't just ignore it. He suggested waking the girl to inform her, but Eric stopped him, requesting that she be allowed to rest a little longer, as she was exhausted from her daily workload and studies. Wind Spirit reluctantly agreed, though he mentioned it was a difficult request, as they were Lily's spirits and bound to fulfill her wishes. He reminded Eric that, although Lily was the strongest wizard, she was still just a young girl, and with the Marquis and Iris absent, Eric didn't want to alarm her. Wind Spirit asked what Eric would do if Lily were in danger, and Eric replied that he would take up a sword and fight. Wind Spirit accepted this, agreeing to follow Eric's lead.
The wind spirit then suggested that water spirit take human form to communicate more effectively, adding that Eric might appreciate the gesture. Eric thanked the wind spirit, who assured him he would handle the situation personally. Eric said he would inform everyone about the intruders and asked Lassa, the water spirit, to keep an eye on the girl. Water spirit didn't understand why he had to follow Eric's orders and told him not to ignore him, but the wind spirit reminded him that they all shared the same goal of protecting Lily. He encouraged cooperation, adding that he was even grateful to have someone who cared about their beloved Lily as much as they did. Eric ran through the palace, immediately alerting the guards to secure the courtyard and instructing them to contact nearby soldiers in case the intruders had accomplices. One of the butlers agreed to try to reach the lord as soon as possible. Despite his training in royal etiquette, Eric was uncertain of his ability to handle bandits in a real combat situation and realized he might be out of his depth. Meanwhile, the bandits reached Lily's room, and one ordered the others to search it, confident the papers they were looking for would be there. At that moment, the wind spirit appeared before them, asking what they were doing and why they hadn't followed proper etiquette. The bandits demanded to know who he was, and the wind spirit replied that if they had wanted to see him, they should have entered through the front door. "Isn't that the polite thing to do?" he asked. The bandits attempted to attack, but the wind spirit warned them that it would likely be the end of them, advising them to surrender before getting hurt. With a single blow, he knocked them down, then mocked them, asking if they were truly that weak. At that moment, Wind Spirit noticed a small magical beast and commented that if the intruders didn't have much magical power, they should be more selective about who they worked with. One of the bandits got back on his feet and attempted to stab the Wind Spirit with a knife, but Eric intervened and saved the spirit just in time. Another bandit tried to cast a spell, but Wind Spirit simply used a gust of wind to knock them all back. One of the magical creatures tried to escape, but Wind Spirit was about to catch it when it slipped away. Eric approached the Wind Spirit to check if he was all right. The Wind Spirit assured him that he was fine and jokingly asked if Eric planned to go anywhere without him. Eric replied that he was fine, but then asked the spirit if it was all right as well, noticing that it had barely replenished its magic. He admitted that he'd been worried the situation might spiral out of control, though it seemed his concerns were unnecessary. The spirit thanked him for his help. Meanwhile, Viscount Beryl realized he'd underestimated the estate's defenses, thinking they'd be weaker with the head of the family absent. The butler warned Beryl that they needed to escape soon, as their pursuers were closing in. Beryl acknowledged this, insisting that he would retrieve the papers before they left. The protagonist then heard a loud noise in the distance. She wasn't sure what it was and considered getting up, but she felt comforting arms gently wrapped around her, and she wanted to stay like that a little longer. As she fully woke, she noticed Eric lying beside her. She was confused, wondering what he was doing there, and realized he must have seen her sleeping face again. They had clearly fallen asleep together, but it felt like something more meaningful to her. Seeing Eric's peaceful, sleeping face felt like a reward. At breakfast the next morning, she learned that there had been a break-in. She asked why Eric hadn't woken her up, saying that she would have been fine even if the intruders had been there. Iris explained that by the time she arrived, the bandits were already gone and mentioned that Master Eric had led the estate's guards to drive them off. However, Eric downplayed his role, saying he hadn't done much. Iris expressed her gratitude that Eric had stayed, thanking him for his help. At this point, her father jokingly asked if this meant he was forgiven for spending time with Lilia, but Iris, sitting at the table, told him to be quiet. She also remarked that she wasn't sure what the bandits had been looking for in the children's room. The protagonist then remembered that the Wind Spirit had mentioned the noise was caused by intruders searching for something. She realized that the bandits had risked everything to get into her room, which was, in fact, the children's room. The only valuable items there were her papers. At this point, she informed her parents that she had a suspicion about what was happening. She told them she thought she might be able to catch all the bandits herself. In the next scene, we see a castle, and several carriages are driving by. Eric is with Lily, and he remarks that it is such a nice day. Lily blushes and agrees. Eric suggests that it's the perfect day for their date, and Lily blushes even more, replying that she is indeed looking forward to it. However, as she tries to steady herself, she feels dizzy from the nerves.
Eric notices her discomfort and asks if she's alright. Lily reassures him, though she's secretly panicking.
She wonders how she ended up here, going on a date with Eric. A few days earlier, Eric, Guy, and Lillian's mother were sitting together. Guy asks, "What do you mean by capturing the thief?" Guy responds, "We don't know exactly who they are, but Lily says, but we'll find out." Lily adds, "If we don't know who they are, we can lure them out. The thief has been trying to steal something from my room, probably a piece of ancient magic. It's the only thing that's been taken outside of the royal palace, where it's kept under tight security." Eric says he will check with his emperor immediately, but Guy is concerned. He mentions that the thief somehow knew about the exhibition and might be targeting the item. Lily agrees, saying, "Yes, the thief will definitely come in contact with me if I leave the residence.
We can catch them then." Guy is astonished. "What are you saying, Lily? Are you suggesting we use you as bait?" He reacts angrily, "How could I let you be in such danger?" Lily understands why he would react this way, but she knows that if they know about the item's value, they'll come again to take it. She explains, "I know the palace security would typically be enough, but if we tighten the security, it might delay my research and publication, which would harm my future plans." She thought her mother would understand this, as Iris had always supported her. However, Iris, concerned, says, "You're saying this would put you in danger. Do you understand that?" Lily confidently replies, "I'll be protected by my spirits will keep me safe." But Iris raises another concern. What about those around you, your servants, guards, and even the people in the town?
They could be in danger too. Iris says that if she feels truly threatened, she will leave immediately. Iris hesitates but eventually says, "I usually wouldn't approve of this, but as a daughter of Marcus, you can't hide in fear from mere thieves." Lily smiles, calling her mother's name happily.
Eric asks, "Are you sure about this, Iris?" Guy is astonished and asks the same.
Iris was astonished when she saw Lily blushing. "But please refrain from making it awkward," Lily said, flustered.
"Okay, Lily," Iris replied, then began thoroughly preparing to ensure Lily's safety.
She looked at Guy, who seemed to have no choice but to agree. Sir Eric gently placed his hand on Lily's shoulder and said, "Let me go with Lady Lily.
It will be safe." Iris asked, "Are you sure, Sir Eric?" Eric smiled reassuringly.
"Of course, I will protect her." Iris sighs, saying, "Leave the security to us and go have fun." Lily recalls that this is how they ended up in the carriages on their way to town. She reflects on the plan to capture the thieves, but hearing the word date again makes her feel nauseous from nervousness. Lily thought to herself, "What a cute pose." She thinks quickly, "I need to prepare a camera." Sir Eric observes, "You and your mother are truly strong people."
He pauses, then says, "Oh, never mind. Is there anywhere in particular you want to visit?" Lily smiles and responds, "I'd like to visit a magical tool shop.
I think it could help me gather ideas for making cameras and visual glasses that might aid with my research." Sir Eric helps Lily out of the carriage. "We have arrived," he says. "Thank you," Lily replies as she steps onto the ground, astonished by the town's beauty. They arrive in a bustling medieval town, where some people are purchasing fruits, others are drinking beer, and some girls are chatting. The streets are lively, just like in a game, with colorful food vendors lining the streets, adventurers going in and out of bars, and children laughing joyfully.
Guy asks, "Is this your first time in town, Lady Lily?"
Lily replies, "Yes, but she wonders, I smell something suspicious."
Sir Eric suggests, "Since it's nearly lunchtime, let's have a meal first." They enter a restaurant, and soon delicious food is placed on the table. Lily tries the food, which reminds her of Chinese cuisine but with less oil.
She thinks, heavenly seasoned food with lightly flavored bread to complement it, delicious. Sir Eric smiles, pleased that she likes the food, but then his expression turns serious. Lily's heart starts pounding as she watches him, thinking, this is the first time I've seen Sir Eric so serious. She's mesmerized by how elegant he is as he eats. She blushes, thinking, he eats so gracefully. Outside, some guards keep watch, and a few people are hiding in the bushes. We've identified Lady Lily, one of them says. Report to Sir Delaware. He gives the command to another unit. Each unit must remain stationed until further orders are given. Meanwhile, a wind spirit senses something suspicious. Later, Lily visits a magical tool shop, where the shopkeeper greets her warmly. Lily is astonished by the variety of items. So this is a magical tool shop, she thinks, as the shopkeeper explains, we have everything, from daily necessities to magical ornaments. Lily sees many items she's never encountered before, like a magical tool that lets one apply oil to their skin through a magical wind circle, similar to perfume. Her attention shifts to a glowing pendant. I wonder if I could use this for a photo project, she thinks. Her eyes then land on some bottles, and she asks, what do once and twice mean on these? The shopkeeper explains, those are the number of times the magic can be activated. Once it reaches the limit, the tool can no longer be used. It informs you how many uses are left. Lily nods thoughtfully, considering the possibilities. Lily looks at the pen and thinks, this is quite different. She wonders if it has any practical uses. Curious, she asks the shopkeeper about it. The shopkeeper smiles, saying, you have a good eye, young lady. This pen is quite popular. It can be used with ink made from magical water, which makes it more durable than most magical tools. Lily is intrigued. Magical water? She thinks. It's just a small amount of water a spirit can produce, but its quality changes depending on the spirit's power. She notices the pen is completely black, and it piques her interest even more. She asks, could I have this pen? The shopkeeper swiftly takes the pen from Lily, wraps it up, and says, thank you for your purchase. Lily looks at Sir Eric and asks, why are you buying this for me? Sir Eric smiles and replies, you wanted it, didn't you? Lily nods but then adds, I want to give it to you as a gift, to thank you for everything you've done for me. Sir Eric smiles again, but then shakes his head. Thank you, but I can't use magical tools. Lily is taken aback. She looks at Sir Eric, thinking, but why? She starts to question herself. Why did I bring him here? Even though he doesn't have magic. She feels conflicted, recalling how often she talks about magic in front of him. Was I insensitive? She feels the urge to cry, but Sir Eric, sensing her distress, gently reassures her, it's all right, Lily. It's fascinating and interesting when you talk about magic, so don't worry about it. Lily smiles weakly, I'll leave the camera for later. I don't care about this gift anymore. I'll definitely make a magic tool that Eric can use. Meanwhile, in another scene, a butler enters and says, Madam Iris, there are no issues with the young lady, everything is going smoothly as planned. Iris smiles and replies, I'm glad to hear that. I'm here for you, ma'am. Iris thinks to herself, even though I know she'll try to do everything on her own, if that's the case, I'd rather have her do what she wants within her reach. Just then, another servant appears and says, Miss Iris, excuse me, there's a guest for you. Iris, surprised, asks, a guest? I wasn't notified about this. The servant continues, the guest is a nobleman. He says he has business with you and wishes to notify you personally. Lily and Sir Eric strolled leisurely from shop to shop, their presence drawing smiles and gratitude from the shopkeepers, who repeatedly thanked them for visiting again. Accompanying them were two vigilant bodyguards, subtly ensuring their safety. Unbeknownst to them, a group of assassins lurked nearby, observing their every move. The assassins assumed that with only two guards protecting Lily and Sir Eric, the odds were in their favor. Ahead lay a deserted alley, the perfect spot to strike once Sir Dazel gave his orders. Suddenly, a voice interrupted their path. Hey, you guys! A man with a hood covering most of his face stepped forward, his voice casual but his presence oddly deliberate.
"You're adventurers, right? Why not buy some of our dried provisions? They're perfect for long journeys and can be preserved for days. He highly recommends them."
One of the guards politely declined, informing the man that they already had enough supplies.
"That's too bad," the hooded man replied, stepping back into the crowd. Meanwhile, in a grand estate, noblemen sat in an opulent lounge alongside Iris.
Nobleman, seated comfortably on a plush couch, casually remarked, as expected of the Marinas family, "You have quite an impressive estate here in the royal capital." A butler, standing nearby, nodded in agreement. Nobleman, sitting across from them, smirked faintly.
"Compared to your expansive grounds, the small plots we Dazel sons hold are hardly worth mentioning. It would be generous of you to share even a portion of it with us."
Lady Iris replied politely, "She is honored by your words." Iris studied him carefully and responded, "You mentioned you had urgent business with us.
What exactly is it about?"
The nobleman's thoughts raced as he observed her composed demeanor.
"The rumors about Lady Iris Marinus Carroll are true. Despite being a woman, her skills as a ruler are formidable.
She could have easily turned away a low-ranking noble like him at the door, yet she invited him in without hesitation. Perhaps she's let her guard down, a favorable sign for him."
Clearing his throat, the nobleman finally spoke aloud. "The reason for his visit today is business-related. He wishes to propose something to the Marinas family. He'd like to publish Lady Lilia's dissertation as a book."
Lady Iris raised an eyebrow, her expression puzzled.
"Dissertation?
What could you possibly mean by that?" Nobleman chuckled softly, leaning back against the couch.
"Ah, she's pretending not to understand. Well, it hardly matters."
The nobleman smirked to himself, convinced that he had the upper hand in this negotiation.
Nobleman composed himself and said, "Oh dear, where are his manners? The existence of this dissertation was top secret, wasn't it?"
The nobleman cleared his throat and replied, "His Majesty has entrusted him with managing several important documents, and during his duties, he happened to come across Lady Lilia's dissertation." In his mind, the nobleman admitted that the story he was spinning was a blatant lie, but he was confident that Lady Iris wouldn't bother tracking the minor duties assigned to lower nobility. Aloud, he continued with exaggerated admiration, "The nonverbal spells detailed in the dissertation are truly magnificent.
Who would have thought Lady Lilia would uncover new possibilities for magic potential that humanity has yet to fully grasp?
It would be an absolute shame to let such a discovery remain hidden in the royal palace. He proposes publishing it as a book, to share this brilliance with the public. This could revolutionize magical tools across the empire, benefiting us all greatly."
Iris raised an eyebrow, her voice steady and sharp. "If this dissertation truly exists, why not discuss it directly with His Majesty instead of bringing it to us?
Surely, such an important matter should be handled by the crown."
The nobleman hesitated, then chuckled nervously. "Ah, but you see, if he were to present this to His Majesty, there would be no room left for him.
If this discovery were made public under the royal family's authority, the profits and recognition would be absorbed entirely by the national treasury."
"So," Iris said with a sly smile, "you want to publish it in secret, without His Majesty's knowledge?"
The nobleman coughed and laughed awkwardly.
"Well, something like that." "Oh, my, what an invigorating conversation this is." Iris's smile widened. "If that's the case, why not publish it on your own?
That way, you could keep all the profits for yourself without needing our involvement."
The nobleman sighed dramatically. "If only it were that simple, Lady Iris."
You see, he only managed to catch a glimpse of a few pages. He has no knowledge of the dissertation's specifics or the finer details of the nonverbal spell research.
He laughed again, though it sounded forced this time. "He must look rather foolish right now, doesn't he?"
But it's obvious he would, of course, need the author's permission. Besides, if he attempted to publish a copy of the dissertation currently held by His Majesty, he would be charged with treason.
But a newly written version by Lady Lilia? Now that would be entirely above board.
The nobleman leaned forward, his tone earnest. He assures Lady Iris he will do everything in his power to support this endeavor.
He'll provide funds, sales channels, whatever is necessary. All he asks is for Lady Lilia's cooperation. He then asked, "What do you think? Surely, this isn't such a bad proposal, is it?" Iris smiled politely but shook her head. "It's certainly an interesting proposal, Count."
However, she paused, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Our Lady Lilia is only 5 years old, a child far too young to have written such an impressive dissertation.
Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding." Iris smiled politely and said, "She's afraid she must ask him to leave now."
The nobleman's expression darkened slightly as he replied in an irritated tone, "He sees then he will negotiate directly with the lady herself."
Iris's eyes narrowed. "What did you just say?" The nobleman smirked as he revealed his plan. "The lady is currently out in town, correct?
He's already given orders to his subordinates to bring her to his mansion."
"What do you say now, Lady Iris?" Iris's voice remained steady as she asked, "What do you mean by this? What are you trying to do with her daughter?"
The nobleman smirked and suddenly stepped forward, planting his foot firmly in front of Iris.
His tone turned mocking as he said, "Well now, Lady Iris, what do you think? Will you cooperate with him now, Marinus Carl?"
He let out a low, triumphant laugh.
"It's checkmate."
With her daughter in his grasp, you have no choice but to comply with his demands. Inwardly, the nobleman's mind raced with self-satisfaction. In his mind, the nobleman reflected on his past.
"We nobles were once just merchants, traveling in and out of small villages.
Over time, our village grew into a town, and for our efforts to improve the lives of its people, we were granted noble titles by the king. But even then, nobility was just a word to us. Luxury, wealth, and grand residences were nothing but distant dreams. The discovery of Lady Lilia's dissertation, however, this was a blessing from the heavens." The nobleman clenched his fists tightly, his smile widening with greed. "With this, we can finally say goodbye to our lives of poverty. Wealth, status, and glory, everything will be within our reach."
Iris remained calm despite his theatrics.
"You say such strange things," she remarked coolly. The nobleman ignored her, but Iris turned her head as she called out, "As Iris says, Lilia was here."
From the hallway, Lilia appeared.
But something was wrong, her normally vibrant color had shifted to a pale blue hue.
The nobleman froze, his confidence cracking as he stammered, "What? How is this possible?"
Lilia stepped forward gracefully, bowed politely, and introduced herself.
"My name is Lilia Carl." The nobleman's face twisted with confusion and disbelief. "No, this can't be. I received a report Lilia Carl was supposed to be in town."
His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. But despite his confusion, he quickly refocused on his ambitions. "No, this changes nothing," he shouted, his voice rising with manic determination. "With Lady Lilia's dissertation in his hands, we can gain wealth incomparable to anything the current nobles possess.
We can surpass even the royal family. Status, honor, power, everything we've ever desired will be ours."
He extended a hand toward Lilia, his eyes gleaming with delusion.
"Let's rule this country together, you and I." But Lilia's expression remained calm as she looked him directly in the eyes and said firmly, "What utter nonsense." The nobleman stammered, "What?"
Lilia stepped forward, her voice steady and sharp.
"How dare you try to use me so carelessly?"
But something was off, her voice echoed, and her appearance shimmered. In an instant, her figure began to ripple like water. The form of Lilia melted away, revealing a water spirit in her place.
The water spirit's gaze was cold as it spoke. "I'll never forget what you've done."
The nobleman staggered back, his face pale.
"A water spirit?"
The butler, his voice trembling, spoke up. Young master, Lady Lilia has red hair. This figure here has sky blue tones. The nobleman snapped at the butler. You should have told him sooner, fool. But before anyone could react further, the water spirit raised her hands and commanded, brace yourselves. Magic surged around her, and the air grew thick with moisture. Ice began forming rapidly, spreading across the floor and walls. The nobleman gasped as his feet were suddenly frozen in place, locking him in an icy trap. Young master, the butler cried. Let me out of here, the nobleman yelled, his voice cracking with panic. Lady Iris stepped forward, her voice calm and cutting. Count Dazel, you were the one who sent those bandits, weren't you? The nobleman stammered, unable to respond. Iris continued coldly, you can discuss your plans for the dissertation inside a jail cell. His Majesty will love to hear about this treachery. The nobleman's face twisted with desperation. No, it's too late. My men have already been ordered to capture Lady Lilia. Iris chuckled darkly. Oh dear, what a pity. At that moment, chaos erupted outside. The sound of clashing steel and shouting filled the air. Capture Lady Lilia, came a command from an unseen voice. A group of guards appeared, swords drawn, stepping between Lilia and Sir Eric. But before they could make a move, a blur of motion cut through the chaos. One of the assassins was abruptly lifted off his feet and slammed into the ground with bone-crushing force. The other assassins froze, staring in disbelief. You, one of them stuttered. You're the shopkeeper from earlier. The man stepped into the light, and the shocked assassins realized the truth. The shopkeeper wasn't just a simple vendor, he was none other than Guy Carl, captain of the Civil Order and Lilia's father. Guy smirked as he cracked his knuckles. Didn't anyone teach you that adventurers shouldn't resort to violence so carelessly? Lilia gasped, Father. From the shadows, dozens of knights emerged, surrounding the remaining assassins. Their armor gleamed under the moonlight as they formed a protective barrier around Lilia and Sir Eric. Guy stepped forward, raising his hand. Fire spirit, he called out with authority. Flames erupted around him, wrapping his body in a reddish glow. Sparks danced along his fingertips, and arcs of lightning crackled through the air. The assassins staggered back in horror. The captain of the Civil Order? Why is he here? Guy smirked confidently. There's only one reason he's here. In one fluid motion, he charged forward, flames and lightning trailing behind him. The assassins stood no chance. Within moments, they lay defeated on the ground, smoke rising from their battered forms. To protect his daughter, he said firmly. Sir Eric stood in awe. So that's the strength of the captain of the Selic Order. Lilia turned to Eric with pride in her voice. Father can use physical enhancement magic through the power of the fire spirit. In hand-to-hand combat, no one can match him. Guy turned to his daughter, his stern expression softening. Are you okay, Lilia? She nodded. Yes, Father. You and the guards protected her. Lilia added, yes, Sir Eric was right beside her the entire time. Guy walked up to Eric, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Sir Eric, for protecting my daughter. He's truly grateful. But then his tone became slightly stricter. However, don't get too close to his daughter. Lilia, slightly embarrassed, called out, Father. The next day, the investigation had concluded. Iris sat at her desk, reviewing the report. It seems the investigation is mostly complete, she said aloud. Count Dazel, the lord of a small, impoverished town in the countryside, went to the royal palace, likely seeking financial support from His Majesty. But during his visit, he stumbled upon Lilia's dissertation. Iris paused, her brows furrowed. Whether that was good luck or bad luck for him remains unclear. The emperor himself had issued an apology to Guy, acknowledging that the dissertation had not been securely managed. The day the bandits attacked the mansion, Iris continued reading.
It seems Count Dazel also orchestrated an accident on the main road.
This forced the Selic order to be dispatched, diverting their forces away from the estate.
She sighed.
It wasn't just you, Guy.
She was tricked as well. Count Dazel sold a rare piece of artwork to a noble family friend, prompting them to host an emergency exhibition party.
She had to leave the mansion in a hurry to attend, just as he intended.
Guy nodded.
In the end, nothing was stolen, thanks to Sir Eric's and Lilia's quick actions. And thanks to Lilia's suggestions, we were able to apprehend the Viscount and the bandits before they could succeed. At this moment, Lilia spoke up, her voice calm yet firm.
Strengthening security around the mansion won't be enough.
We need to set traps as well.
Iris frowned slightly. What do you mean?
Lilia explained, the bandits may attempt another attack right after she leaves the mansion, perhaps during a direct negotiation for the dissertation. Rather than capturing her outright in public, they might try to threaten us by implying they can capture her at any moment.